Hey, what's up guys? Joker here, and I hope you're all doing well. Today I'm going to be bringing you another Mafia video. I know the last video that I did from last week was specifically about the Mafia 1 remake and why you should maybe be concerned about that game, and I still have, those same concerns. Everything I said in that video holds up to be true, but today I'm going to be focusing specifically on Mafia 3, which when it came out had an extremely poor reception, but since the definitive edition came out, I've really sat down and put a significant amount of time into the game, and a lot of those issues, the people that brought up when the game came out are still there. However, the inclusion in the definitive edition of the DLCs and also some of the stuff that was problems with the game when it first came out being fixed, I've actually found myself enjoying the game quite a bit, although some of those problems are still there, so I definitely can't say it's a concrete, like, oh yeah, you should pick this game up, it's actually way better than people are saying, because it still has a lot of these problems. So it's really going to depend on, how much you could pick this game up for, and also if you're willing to put up with certain elements. So I kind of wanted to break those down for people today that maybe aren't familiar with some of the pitfalls of this game, and also some of the positive things about Mafia 3 with the definitive edition being out there, and whether or not it's really worth you spending your money to pick this game up in 2020. But first, today's video is brought to you by MMORC.com, where you could save money on games for all of your favorite platforms, as well as software like Windows 10 Pro, which you can get for just $15, as well as Office 2019 Pro and Office 365. And if you act right now, you can get an additional 27% off with my code JOK27 at checkout, and that'll knock the price down on Windows 10 Pro from $15.29 all the way down to $11.16. And of course, they accept a wide variety of payment from PayPal to credit cards to Bitcoin. So be sure to act now and hit up the links down in the description below. So, Mafia 3 came out back on October 6th of 2016, and its initial reception was not great, especially on the PC, which is where I am playing this game right now. It had a lot of issues specific to the PC. As of right now, in 2020, the critic score on Metacritic is 62, while the user score is a lowly 3.7, and, based on the fact that most of these reviews are probably from 2016, I would definitely say that it's probably accurate, outside of, some things like the game having repetitive gameplay loops, which I'm going to go into a little bit deeper further on in the video in case you're not familiar with how the basic mission structure is in Mafia 3. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in depth, but one of the user reviews I found over on Metacritic actually sums it up pretty accurately. So some of the negatives are actually gone now. So this user by the name of KSO gave the game a 3, and he says his negatives for the game are low textures, 30 frame per second lock, constant game crashing, bad lighting, and glitches falling under the textures of the map over and over again. And then his positives were the story and the soundtrack. So for the positives, I can say definitely the story is very good. It's solid. I've enjoyed it. And the soundtrack is 10 out of 10. If you're familiar with any sort of Vietnam era films, Creedence Clearwater Revival, that kind of stuff, Forrest Gump, like the kind of soundtracks you would hear in a movie like that, or any Vietnam movie, really. If you're a fan of that type of late 60s, early 70s type of music, then you're going to enjoy the soundtrack immensely in this game. It's probably one of the best features of the game besides the story. Now, as far as the negatives that KSO mentioned, the low textures, yeah, that's something I could agree with. Some of the textures in this game could be better, but really it's not distracted me from enjoying the game. But thankfully, all the other negatives that he listed, like the 30 frame per second lock, that was an issue when the game first came out. That's completely gone. It's an unlocked frame rate now. I'm playing on a 120 hertz monitor, and it supports that. Constant game crashing, I've not experienced a single game crash, as this game has had numerous patches, obviously, since 2016 to address these issues. Bad lighting, that is another one that I remember from back in 2016, where the game would look extremely like white, almost basically, because the skyboxes and the lighting were completely broken. Again, that's something that's been fixed. And glitches falling under the map and through textures, again, that's something I've not experienced at all. So a lot of this stuff has been patched out by the developers over the course of the last 4 years, as you would hope to have happened. And in terms of performance on the PC, the game is running decently well for me. I'm running on a 2080 Ti. I normally play at 4K, but I did knock this game down to about a 90% resolution scale through a custom resolution in the NVIDIA control panel. I was getting 60 frames per second the majority of the time at native 4K, but there were enough dips here and there that it was kind of, ruining the experience for me, so I ended up playing at 90% resolution, and now I get like 70 to 90 frames per second, so I've enjoyed it at that. If that's something that's going to bother you, I mean, you might have some issues depending on the performance that you're expecting to get out of this game, but it has run well enough for me that I'm willing to put up with some of the issues because of the fact that I am enjoying the story quite a bit in the game. Now, another thing, and this is really going to be one of the biggest things I think needs to be mentioned, and that is the repetitive gameplay loops, which is one of the biggest things cited by a lot of the critics and fans early on when this game first came out. A lot of the missions are pretty much like all of the missions apart from maybe like the first few hours of the game, and a few big key story missions are more or less exactly identical apart from the DLCs, which I'll talk about in a minute, because the DLCs actually kind of save this game, and especially with this being the definitive edition that includes all of the DLCs, that's kind of one of the reasons why I think it's worth picking up Mafia 3 in 2020, really is the DLCs. But the repetitive gameplay loops of the main story are definitely still front and center, and after the first few hours of the game, once the story gets basically set up, you kind of fall into this basic mission structure that does not really change in any way whatsoever. And if you've never played Mafia 3, I'll give you a quick breakdown of exactly what happens. So after the first few hours of the game, the story's set up. More or less what you do over and over and over again is you go to these different districts and you will interact with an NPC in the game, and they'll sort of break down a racket for that area, which can be anything from weed or drugs, prostitution, garbage scams, all these different types of criminal activities that you maybe would associate with organized crime and things of the like. So the types of things you would associate with organized crime are what these rackets basically are, and your job is to basically come into these areas and take over the rackets, and the way you do that is the same every single time. You are going to go to different locations, different buildings, but when you get there, you're doing the same thing over and over again. Basically, what your job is to do is you will get a certain value amount for an area. So you might go into an area and it might say, okay, you need to create, do $50,000 worth of damage to this racket by going to a few different areas, a few different buildings, and either destroying property, stealing money from them, taking out lieutenants in that racket's business, and eventually once you have done enough damage to the racket, it'll draw out the sort of like the captain or the head of that racket, and then you will have to either just completely take them out and kill them, or you can recruit them to work within your racket after you've taken over the area, which you will then assign to one of your lieutenants, which can be out of a few different characters in the game, one of which, if you played Mafia 2, is Vito Scaletta, which was the main protagonist in Mafia 2, so it's nice seeing him make a return to this game. So if you played Mafia 2, even though this isn't a direct sequel, there are characters from that game that do make an appearance, like Vito, who is, involved in the game. He's not really a main story character. He's basically one of these lieutenants that you can have to sort of run the rackets and the districts once you have taken over those areas. But once you have a basic understanding of what the taking over the rackets is, you are going to be doing that, and you're going to be doing that a lot. I believe I've heard it's something like 36 different times. You are going to do the same mission structure over and over and over and over again. And yes, you'll be going to different buildings, but it's more or less the same thing, and it does not change apart from a few main story missions that'll help to kind of push the narrative further, and that's really kind of much later on in the game and a couple sort of towards the middle. But that's really the mission structure. So based on that, if that was just all you were getting was just the main story of the game and these missions, I would say that it's probably not worth picking it up even for a reduced price. Maybe for like $10 or something like that, it could still be worth playing. But yeah, not for that. But the DLCs, I will say, actually make this game worth playing quite a bit. I believe there are 4 major DLCs outside of like some extra vehicles and clothing and outfits and stuff that were added into the game after the game initially came out. But I'm really just focusing here on the story DLCs, which are honestly, if these were in the game when it first came out, I feel like the critics and fans would have been so much happier with the game, because it almost feels like these were side stories that should have been in the game that maybe the developers weren't given enough time to complete for the game to come out, and they wanted to parse it out as paid DLC so they can make some extra money off of the title. And that's kind of disappointing, because the DLCs are excellent. They are so much better than the basic rackets and mission structures that you're going to see throughout the main story. And those alone definitely make the game worth playing. The mission types themselves are varied. You're going to be doing different activities like running from the cops, destroying things. Just a lot more fun overall. It's not as repetitive, and it's a little bit varied. Of course, you're still going to be mostly going through areas and just shooting enemies and stuff like that. But there's enough variance in the activities to make the DLCs worth playing, and they're integrated directly into the story. You do need to get to like a certain point in the story before you can start playing them, but it's early on enough. It's after just maybe like 4 or 5 hours of playing the game, you'll have access to all of the DLC story content. And for that, I would say Mafia 3 is probably worth picking up. Now, the game right now for the Definitive Edition is like $30, although you can find it on some websites for around like $26. It's been discounted. Actually, like a month before the Definitive Editions were announced and released, it was they had a free weekend over on Steam, and you could have picked it up for like $10, and then it would have been upgraded for free to the Definitive Edition. If you picked that up, I'd say, good on you. You made a pretty good purchase there. But really, right now, I mean, I guess the Mafia trilogy kind of makes the most sense to pick up. It's $60, unfortunately, but that is going to include the Mafia 1 remake, which is meant to be a full-on remake. Hopefully it ends up being good. I still have my concerns about it, but hopefully it does end up being really good, which on itself is going to cost $40. So if you think about it that way, the Mafia trilogy, you're basically getting the Mafia 1 remake for $40, and then Mafia 2 and Mafia 3 are like two $10 additional add-ons. If you've never played Mafia 2, then it's definitely worth playing that. I wouldn't say it's worth replaying just for the fact that it's the Definitive Edition, because the DLCs for Mafia 2 were terrible, and they've not done enough with the graphics or the gameplay elements to sort of bring it into the modern era. So Mafia 2 is not a huge recommendation for me to play in 2020, but the story and everything like that are still very good. And I loved Mafia 2 back when it first came out. I just don't think it's aged particularly well. However, Mafia 3, even with its problems, having some performance issues here or there, and having the repetitive gameplay loops, I feel like it's fun enough for the base game as long as you're okay with the repetitive nature of it, because the story makes up for it, the soundtrack is excellent, and then when you throw in the DLCs, which are now included along with the game, it sort of makes sense to go ahead and pick it up. And like I said, you can get the Definitive Edition for around $25 to $30, or you can get the full-on trilogy if you want to get that. I would feel much more comfortable saying as a standalone to pick up Mafia 3 Definitive if it was under $20, but that's just really not the case right now, and it seems like even key sites don't have the original Mafia 3 keys available anymore. It seems like they've just completely gone away now that the Definitive Edition come out. There's like no, basically, it's like you can't buy the original version anymore, except on GOG, I believe, still has the original version of the game, but that you don't get a free upgrade to the Definitive Edition or anything like that, which means you don't get the DLCs. I believe it was even on sale for $10 for just the base game of Mafia 3, which could be okay, but keep in mind you're not getting the DLCs with the GOG version of this game, which is on sale right now for $10. So at the end of the day, my recommendation is Mafia 3 worth playing in 2020? Absolutely, as long as you're aware of some of the issues that I mentioned with it, with the repetitive missions. But I think the DLCs make a good case for why you should consider putting your time into playing this game. I think the trilogy, picking up the Mafia trilogy for $60 is probably the best value, even though it's a pretty decent investment for $60. I'd say really that's only worth getting if you definitely want the Mafia 1 remake, which I hope is going to be good. Maybe wait until that comes out and pick it up at that time and then play through Mafia 3 after you've played Mafia 1 if it's something that ends up coming out and is as good as we all hope that it can be. But that's all I've really got for you guys right now. As I said, I've been playing Mafia 3. I've been enjoying it surprisingly, even though when this game first came out, I hated it so much because of things like the 30 FPS lock on PC, the graphical glitches, the crashing. All of that stuff was such a big problem when it came out. Thankfully, they've been fixed. And yeah, with the DLCs, I've had a good time playing this game because the story is also very good, soundtrack and everything. So that's really all I've got for you guys today. If I had to give this game a score for the year 2020 as an overall package for the Definitive Edition, I'd say that it's like a solid 7.5 out of 10. It's a recommendation. from me to play it if you can get it at a good price and you're okay with some of the elements I mentioned. So that's all I've got for you guys today. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. If you enjoyed this review of Mafia 3 and my recommendation, let me know down in the comments below. Maybe you'd like to see more videos like this in the future. I'm going to go and get out of here, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow for another video. Ta-ra.